Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Game of Thrones character analysis for Arya Stark, Part 1. This video is Part 1 of 2, where I give a full analysis on the character journey of Arya Stark, recapping her journey in the show from the very first episode up to the most recent season, Season 7, analyzing how her character has developed over her long-term character journey. In this video, I'll cover Arya's character journey up to the end of Season 3. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for Game of Thrones up to the end of Season 3. If you haven't seen it up to this point, you will not want to watch this video. Otherwise, some things will be spoiled for you. So this is continuing on with the video series I started about a year ago when I did a full character analysis of Sansa Stark. This time I thought it would be interesting to tackle the character of her sister Arya. Now, Arya's journey in the show has been quite different from Sansa's, as with Sansa, she starts out as one person and through her journey transforms into a totally different person with a completely different worldview, whereas that's not really the case with Arya, who although goes through a journey and changes a lot, her overall demeanor and worldview basically stays the same. And like Sansa, she goes through a lot of hardship and is subjected to a lot of trauma, but of a very different nature than what Sansa experienced, and so it has a very different effect on her. So when the two sisters finally meet up as adults, they both have grown into two entirely different and separate women, and that was really interesting to me. So let's go ahead and start at Arya's journey, starting with Season 1. In the very first episode, we don't get a lot of Arya, but she's portrayed as a young girl who aspires to become more of the warrior type than the proper lady. The contrast between her and Sansa, who does dream of becoming a lady and a queen and marrying a prince and living in a castle, is emphasized a lot. As we see, Sansa's content learning how to knit, and Arya is very unhappy in this exercise and instead sneaks away so she can shoot arrows, which she is in fact better at doing than her brother. And when King Robert Baratheon arrives in Winterfell, she is delighted at the sight of seeing so many knights and great warriors arrive at Winterfell. She even puts on a helmet herself, but her father scolds her for that as soon as he sees it because she's not meant to act like that. Later, we see that she has formed a bond with her direwolf Nymeria, whom she named after a famous female warrior, which tells you her mindset. And she tries to train Nymeria, but to not much avail. When Jon Snow leaves Winterfell to join the Night's Watch, we get a scene of him saying farewell to Arya, which is pretty much the only scene in the show so far where we see these two interact directly. However, it is implied that Jon, despite not being a Stark, is the sibling that Arya feels closest to. Likely because Jon never tried to push her into behaving like a proper lady like many in her family did. In fact, Jon encourages Arya her desires to become more of a fighter by getting the blacksmith at Winterfell to make a sword just for her that he gives her as a parting gift. Arya names this sword Needle as a way to mock Sansa and her sewing needles, as a way to say that this is the kind of needle that she would prefer to yield. Needle will indeed become a very important symbol to her, her ties to her family throughout her journey. Next, Arya departs for King's Landing, with her father Ned and her sister Sansa. Her younger brother Bran was meant to leave with them as well, but was severely injured from his fall from the tower, so he had to stay behind at Winterfell. Arya didn't really think that highly of Joffrey or the Lannisters, and in fact mocked Sansa for making eyes at Joffrey and wanting to be his queen. Despite wanting to be more of a fighter than a proper lady, Arya is still very undisciplined and mostly just an ill-tempered young girl, but with the gift of Needle, she wants to try to be more of a proper fighter, so she asks for help from the butcher's son, Micah, who spars with her with wooden sticks. However, when Joffrey and Sansa are out on one of their walks, happen upon to see them training, Joffrey tries to impress Sansa by attacking and bullying the butcher's boy, which Arya doesn't stand for, so attacks Joffrey. But when Joffrey gets the better of him and threatens Arya. Nymeria, ever faithful to her, defends her by attacking Joffrey, and Arya gets a hold of her sword and Joffrey's sword and stands over him with Joffrey at her mercy. But instead, she throws Joffrey's sword in the river and runs away. No doubt showing Joffrey this mercy is something she would grow to regret and wish that she had killed him there. Because instead of being grateful for her mercy, he goes to her mother, the queen, and lies and tells her that Arya, the butcher's boy, and her wolf attacked him unprovoked. So they order the hound to kill the butcher's boy, and Cersei manipulates King Robert into ordering the wolf's execution, despite the fact that Arya had already chased her direwolf Nymeria away, and Nymeria is out running free so that she wouldn't be caught. Instead, they ordered the death of Sansa's wolf, a lady who in fact was innocent, and they killed that wolf anyway. So from this point, Arya started really developing her hatred towards the Lannisters. She hated Joffrey for lying. She hated the Hound for killing the butcher's boy. She hated Cersei for ordering the wolf to be killed. And she hated Sansa for not sticking up for her. And this led to Arya misbehaving once they arrived in King's Landing. So her father sets her aside and tries to explain things to her. Arya admits that she doesn't really hate Sansa and that she's just mad at her, but I believe she does in fact hate the Lannisters. Also, this scene shows how close Arya really is to her father and that they both love and respect each other. As when Ned sees that Arya has a sword, he doesn't take it away from her and instead lets her keep it. In fact, he arranges for a teacher to show her how to use it. Since the sword that she has is more of a Braavosi sword rather than a traditional sword of a Westerosi knight, Ned hires a former First Sword of Braavos to teach Arya how to use it, and that is a quite highly skilled teacher indeed. Syrio Forel is a really tough on Arya, but she immediately takes a liking to him as he teaches her what he refers to as water dancing. Because Syrio Forel doesn't treat her like a girl who is meant to become a proper lady. In fact, what he says to her is that she is a sword. That's all that matters. So Arya becomes immersed in what they refer to as her dancing lessons. Syrio is in fact to become the first in a series of mentors that Arya has throughout her journey that help shape her into the woman that she becomes. From Syrio, she mainly learns the grace of fighting, the importance of stealth, and skill over brute strength, which will serve her well given her small size. When she has a talk with her father, who tells her that her fate is to one day marry a lord and become a lady of a castle and raise their children and look after the castle, she simply says, "That isn't me." So even at this young age, she knows her destiny is to be more of a fighter rather than a traditional Westerosi lady, or perhaps it shows that this inclination is being fed by her sword fighting lessons, which is pushing her further in this direction. Arya comes so engrossed in her training at Syrio's suggestion, she begins chasing cats around the castle in order to become more agile. However, while chasing a cat, she finds herself in the dungeons where Lord Varys meets with Illyrio Mopatis as they plot to put the Targaryens back on the throne. However, Arya doesn't know who they are, nor the context of their conversation. All she hears is them mention that the wolf and the lion will soon be at war, and Illyrio suggesting that they kill Ned Stark to stop it. So all she hears is that someone's threatening her father, so when she tries to tell him about it, she's not able to explain it properly, so he doesn't really take her seriously. So Ned becomes engrossed in the political theater as tensions between himself and the Lannisters rise, and his whole family becomes in danger. And as I covered with Sansa, she's completely oblivious to this and thinks that everything's fine, but Arya is not completely oblivious to it. For one, she already hates the Lannisters and doesn't think kindly of them. And for another thing, that conversation that she overheard with Varys has spooked her and has her worried about her father. So when he later comes to them and tells them that he's sending them back to Winterfell, while Sansa is shocked and protests, Arya isn't surprised. Arya's only concern is being able to continue her dancing lessons with Syrio Forel, which has become the most important thing in her life. However, other than that, Arya is a lot more accepting of returning to Winterfell than Sansa is, because unlike Sansa, she never wanted to be in King's Landing in the first place. So Arya then carries on with her life as normal, preparing to return home. But before she can, Ned is arrested for betraying the king, when really he was betrayed by Littlefinger and played by Cersei. And this is followed by the bloody aftermath as the Lannisters slaughter all the Stark household guard and anyone with the Starks, with the exception of wanting to take Arya and Sansa hostage to use them against the Starks. So they send men to retrieve the girls while the rest of the Stark men are being slaughtered. Now, they send a hound to retrieve Sansa and Meryn Trant to retrieve Arya. And it's funny to speculate what would have happened had it been the other way around, because retrieving Sansa was actually the easy thing, but getting Arya proved more difficult, as she was training with Syrio Forel at the time, who was smart enough to see that something was wrong when a member of the King's Guard with a bunch of Lannister soldiers went to retrieve Arya, claiming to take her to her father. So he refused to give her up and fought off the Lannister soldiers with nothing but a wooden sword. When Arya begged him to come with her, he refused, saying that the first sword of Braavos never runs. But I think Arya knew what he was doing, which was sacrificing himself so she had time to get away. Now, we didn't actually see Syrio Forel die on screen, which has led a lot to speculate that he's still alive, but I think it's pretty evident by this stage of the show that he is in fact dead, and not showing his death was more of a creative decision because Arya didn't see him die herself. But they show Meryn Trant chopping off his wooden sword and the other Lannister soldiers that he had knocked out getting up again, so I think it was pretty evident that his death was near. However, the fact that this great swordsman gave his life to save her is something that would sit with her and thus end the life of her first mentor in her journey. But his distraction did indeed buy her enough time to get away, but only for her to find her entire household guard murdered. But she went to retrieve the one thing that mattered most to her, her sword needle. However, when doing so, she was spotted by a stable boy who recognized her and wanted to turn her into the queen for a reward. She tried to protest, but the boy tried to grab her and force the issue, so more out of instinctual reaction, she takes needle and stabs him with it, which kills him. And thus, this is the first kill that she makes on her path. Now, later she would kill a Frey soldier and say that it was the first man that she killed, which is technically true because this wasn't a man, it was a boy. But I think more than that, killing him was more of an accident, something she'd done as an unintentional reaction, whereas later she would kill intentionally. However, it is significant as it did teach her that she could kill and how easy it would be to do it. So later we see her scrounging on the streets of King's Landing as a common street lat, killing pigeons in order to survive when she hears about an event involving the hand of the king, her father, at Baelor Sept. So she runs to Baelor Sept to see what the kerfuffle is about, only to see a trial with all the royal court where her father is accused of treason. Now, what's interesting is that she perches up on the statue of Baelor so that she can see what's going on, and her father actually spots her there. And while he's being escorted to the royal court, he sees Euron, the Night's Watchman who was there to retrieve recruits for the Night's Watch. Now, Euron had met Ned and Arya earlier when he came to warn Ned that his wife had arrested Tyrion Lannister. Now, there, Euron had mistaken Arya for a boy, but he has also declared loyalty to Ned as his brother is a member of the Night's Watch. So when Ned saw Euron there, he knew he could trust him, so he shouted Baelor to him. which of course was telling him to look at the statue of Baelor where Arya was. So Ned was basically telling Euron to look after his daughter. So when the trial didn't go as planned, as Ned was confessing to treason in an attempt to save his life so he would be sent to the wall and so he could save the lives of his daughters so they'd be safe. But it doesn't work because Joffrey, being the ill-tempered little shit that he is, orders Ned's death anyway. And when this happens, Arya runs to get closer to her father, but thankfully, Euron intercepts her before she can be spotted. And more than that, he shields her and forces her not to look so that she doesn't see her father's execution. Next, Euron very forcibly takes her aside and begins cutting off her long hair while calling her a boy. When she insists that she isn't a boy, he only responds by saying, "Oh, you're not a smart boy, is that what you're trying to tell me?" And then tells her that she's going north. So basically, his plan is to disguise her as a Night's Watch recruit in order to take her back to Winterfell. And so Arya meets her next important mentor, one I think is often overlooked because they weren't together for very long, but she did spend some time with, and that is Euron. So Euron gives her her new identity, Ari, the orphan boy. Ari is not much of an alias to Arya in my opinion, but whatever. Anyway, he warns her that the recruits she'll be traveling with are dangerous, and indeed her first encounter with them doesn't go well as she meets Hot Pie and Lamy, who try to bully her and steal her sword. But she stands up to them and meets Gendry, who also stands up for her. Now, Gendry I wouldn't say is a mentor character, but more of a friend that will help shape her concept of loyalty. In fact, even Hot Pie and Lamy will become friends despite the rocky start. Of course, her next mentor is in fact present here, but he's locked away in a wagon, and he won't become her mentor until later, so I'll cover that later. So that brings us to her Season 2 storyline, which begins with her traveling with these scummy Night's Watch recruits up to Winterfell. As I said, she ends up making friends with Lamy, Hot Pie, and Gendry, but she has to urinate in secret in order to hide the fact that she's a girl. However, Gendry, being a bit smarter than the others they travel with, catches on to the fact that she's a girl, but keeps her secret for her. However, things get heated when a group of gold cloaks from King's Landing come looking for someone. Arya assumes that they're looking for her, but they are in fact still ignorant of her whereabouts, and they were in fact looking for Gendry, as Joffrey had ordered that all of Robert Baratheon's bastards be killed, and this includes Gendry. But of course, Gendry is still at this stage unaware that he is Robert's bastard, so he doesn't know why they're looking for them. However, when discussing with Arya, she reveals to Gendry her true identity. Gendry is surprised at first, but eventually just teases her about it, so ultimately he doesn't care. She bonds with them more on their travels, but more importantly, she bonds with Euron more, as he had threatened the gold cloaks that came for them. He had scared them off by proving to be a good and brave fighter. So one late night, while everyone is sleeping, she has a talk with him where he reveals why he joined the Night's Watch, where he tells her the story of how his brother was killed by a man named Willem, and how he had made a pact to kill Willem in order to avenge his brother. He described how every night before he went to bed he would say Willem's name as a sort of prayer, because he knew it was the name of the man that he would kill. And he did kill Willem, which is why he joined the Night's Watch, to escape punishment for his crime. So this was in fact the birth of Arya's kill list, which will become a main component of her character. Because unlike Euron, Arya has more than one person she wants to kill. So rather than saying one name every night before she goes to sleep, she says a list of the names of the people that she wants to kill, which will infamously be known as her kill list. However, later that night, a group of Lannister soldiers comes in search of Gendry, and this time there are too many of them. Euron commands that Arya and Gendry hide, and if something happens, for them to just run north and not look back, while he takes the rest of the Night's Watch recruits to take on the Lannister soldiers. Euron fights bravely, but eventually is killed by the Lannister soldiers, and thus another one of Arya's mentors is killed by Lannister soldiers while trying to protect her. However, when seeing their comrades fall, Gendry and Arya can't help themselves and join in the fight. Arya comes across the 3 rough prisoners who are locked in the wagon, which the wagon has caught on fire, so they are going to die, and they're screaming for her to help them, which she does, and this is one act of mercy will actually have a huge impact on her life, which she could not predict, but more on that later. Eventually, the Lannister soldiers overwhelm them and take them prisoner. Arya herself is overtaken by a soldier named Polliver, who steals her sword Needle, saying, "It's a nice little sword, maybe I'll pick my teeth with it." Polliver also comes across Lamy, who is injured, and Lamy says he can't walk, so he'll have to carry him. So Polliver leans over as if he's going to help Lamy, but instead kills him by stabbing him with her sword Needle. They then line up all the Night's Watch recruit survivors and demand they give up Gendry or they'll start mutilating them. So Arya steps forward, and Gendry's obviously nervous, thinking that she'll give him up, but instead she points to Lamy and says that they already got Gendry, as Lamy had grabbed the bull's helmet, which is what the soldiers were told how they could identify Gendry. So it was actually a really clever way to protect herself and her friends. However, the Lannister soldiers take them to Harrenhal, which is currently under the command of Gregor Clegane the Mountain, where they are held under rough conditions. We see that the Mountain randomly selects prisoners who are then taken to be tortured to death by a man called the Tickler, who uses a torch and a bucket to force a rat to burrow into a man's chest as he grills them for information on the Brotherhood without banners, which is the first time we hear of this group that will become important to Arya later. So at night, before Arya goes to sleep, we see for the first time her recite her kill list, where she names Cersei and Joffrey for obvious reasons, and also names the Hound for killing her friend the Butcher's Boy, and then Ilyn Payne for being the man who executed her father. However, we see another prisoner ask Polliver for some water, and he just hits her, so she adds Polliver and the Mountain to the list of people that she's going to kill. However, the next time they come for a prisoner to be tortured to death, they take Gendry and they grill him about the Brotherhood without banners, whom he of course knows nothing about. But before he is killed, Tywin Lannister rides in and puts a stop to it, saying that the prisoners would be more useful as skilled workers rather than being tortured to death. And he also spots Arya and instantly recognizes that she's a girl. When he asks why she's pretending to be a boy, she says it's because it's safer to travel, which Tywin thinks is smart. So he then orders that she be made his cupbearer. And so we get Arya's relationship with Tywin, but I don't think it's correct to call him a mentor character. Although Arya does learn a lot from him, he's never a man she admires, and she always considers him her enemy. She serves him and his men food and wine as they plot the death of her brother and the destruction of her family. But she plays along with this in order to protect herself, and while she's smart enough to protect her true identity from him, he is smart enough to see through some of her subterfuge. Like when she claims to be from the Riverlands, he recognizes that is a lie and recognizes that she's from the north, but she then lies to say that she's from another northern town, which he does believe. So she learns that in order for her lies to be convincing, they need to have an element of truth to them, which is an important lesson. So the rest of her time with Tywin is a bit of a dance, as she has to keep her true identity secret, but being close to Tywin, she can learn more about his plans. So sometimes he can see through her lies and sometimes not. So here Arya learns the art of lying and the art of pretending to be someone else. And this art will become very important to her later in life. However, she's also put to the test when Peter Baelish comes to visit Tywin, as Peter Baelish has met her before, so would recognize her. She tries to hide from him so he doesn't see her, but it's obvious that he does, and he does recognize her. But luckily for her, he doesn't expose her. However, this isn't out of kindness. This has more to do with having information others don't have, so he can use this to his advantage. No doubt he sees the fact that he knows Arya's whereabouts where nobody else does as an advantage, but ultimately he doesn't end up doing much with this knowledge, but Littlefinger's scheming nature just so happened to work in Arya's advantage here. However, while fetching water for Tywin, she does come across someone who I would call her next mentor figure, one of the men she had saved from the burning wagon, Jaqen H'ghar. She at first calls him a traitor for joining the Lannister army, but he points out that she's also working for the Lannisters now, so what's the difference? He then surprises her by saying that since she saved his life and the life of his two companions, 3 lives, that he will offer to kill 3 people in return. So he tells her that all she needs to do is name 3 names and he will kill those people for her, no questions asked. I'm not sure she quite believes him, but she tests him out by naming the Tickler, the man who tortures people to death. Later that day, the Tickler is killed with his neck broken from a fall from a long height. Nobody knows what happened, but Arya spots Jaqen H'ghar, who holds up one finger, signaling that that was her first name. So now Arya knows that Jaqen is serious, and not only that he will kill for her, but that he's highly proficient at killing. But while she's tending to Tywin's needs, she tries to steal away a letter outlining his battle plans, no doubt with the hopes of somehow getting this to her brother. But one of Tywin's men, Aemily Lorch, spots her and can tell that she's up to no good. She manages to get away to find Jaqen and demands that he kill Aemily Lorch now. So just in the nick of time, Jaqen manages to kill Lorch before he's able to blow her cover to Tywin, which is lucky for Arya, but it means that she has used 2 of her kill names, so only has 1 left. She goes to Jaqen and asks him if he can kill anyone she names anywhere, like for example Joffrey, who's in King's Landing. Jaqen says yes, but that he can't guarantee a time frame, that it could take months or years. He says that death is certain, time is not. Not being particularly happy with that answer, she decides to hold on to her last name, but later she regrets that decision as Tywin begins to mobilize his army to attack. Arya believes that he's going to attack the Starks, but in actuality he's actually going to the Battle of Blackwater to defend King's Landing against Stannis, but she doesn't know this and thinks that he's on his way to kill her brother and defeat his forces. So she looks for Jaqen H'ghar to tell him to kill Tywin before he leaves, but Jaqen happens to be out on patrol, and so Arya has to watch Tywin leave, not being able to do anything about it. The next time she sees Jaqen, Tywin is out of his reach, and Jaqen says it could take a long time to kill him if she names him. So Jaqen asks for the final name, but Arya decides that it's time for her to leave, so she names Jaqen H'ghar for her final name, which of course he's not too happy about and asks her to unname him. She says that she will unname him as long as he helps her and her friends escape. He refuses, saying that this would require more than 1 death, and he only owes her 1 death, so that isn't part of the deal. So she says, fine, I name Jaqen H'ghar. So he replies by telling her that she lacks honor, but she just shrugs, which is interesting. So he agrees to it and tells her and her friends to walk through the gates at midnight. So this is interesting as Arya learns to manipulate for her advantage, but what's even more interesting is how seriously Jaqen feels honor-bound to kill whoever Arya names, even if it's his own name. So Arya gathers up Hot Pie and Gendry, and they go to walk through the gates at midnight, but the guards appear to be on duty, so Jaqen seems to have abandoned them, but Arya puts her faith in Jaqen, and against her friend's warnings approaches the gate anyway, only to find that the guards are already dead and pinned against the wall, so her and her friends escape. Shortly thereafter, Jaqen H'ghar catches up to her, and she asks him to show her how to kill as easily and proficiently as he does. He tells her that if she wants to learn, she needs to come with him to Braavos. Arya recognizes Braavos as where Syrio Forel was from, and so mentions that her dancing master was from Braavos as well, and Jaqen replies by saying to be a dancing master is a special thing, but to be a faceless man is something else entirely. Jaqen then goes on to tell Arya that she has many names that she wants to kill, such as Cersei, Joffrey, the Hound, and Ilyn Payne, and says that she can offer all these names up. So basically, he's telling her, he recites her kills list, meaning he's aware of it, but further he implies that were she to come to Braavos with him to train to be a faceless man, that she could kill all those people on her kill list. Which is very interesting. It's a very interesting thing to bear in mind for later on. But Arya declines the offer, saying that she needs to find her brother and her mother, so still, family is something really important to her. So Jaqen then states that he must leave her then because he has other duties as well. However, he gives her a coin he says is of great value, so that if she ever wants to find him again, all she needs to do is to give that coin to someone from Braavos and say the words Vala Morghulis, which is a phrase in High Valyrian which will be used a lot later in the show that means all men must die. Arya repeats the words Vala Morghulis, but when Jaqen begins to leave, she asks him not to go, but he only replies by saying that Jaqen H'ghar is dead, and when he turns around, he looks like a totally different person and has a totally different face, and then he walks off. So he mentioned the term faceless men earlier, and Arya asked him how he killed so easily. So here it's revealed he's able to change his appearance, to change his face, and that is likely what helps him kill. Now, I still insist that Jaqen is Arya's third mentored figure, despite them not having too many interactions together. Not only did Jaqen help Arya a lot, he became something that she wanted to aspire to, a killer who can kill with impunity. After all, she had suffered watching her father die, watching two of her mentors die, sacrificing themselves to save her, and watching people around her get tortured to death in the most cruel ways. Arya sees being able to kill her enemies as the most valuable thing. And the way Jaqen did it was particularly helpful to her, so she wants to keep him around. But more than that, the way she says don't go also portrays that she looks up to him as another father figure, and that she has feelings for him in that way, which is another relationship that will become much more complicated later on. But ultimately, she chooses her family over him, over learning to become an unstoppable killer. So basically here she chooses love over hate. The love of her family and wanting to be with them again over the hate she feels towards those on her kill list and how badly she wants revenge. This is another thing that's interesting to note in this stage in her journey because it won't stay this way for long. So that brings us to Season 3, where Arya meets the Brotherhood without banners. Now, I wouldn't call anyone in the Brotherhood Arya's mentor, but she does learn a bit from them. Namely, she gets a dose of humility after feeling overconfident after just getting help from Jaqen H'ghar. So in this season, she comes off as an overconfident, bratty little girl who talks a lot of big talk but can't necessarily back it up. So while traveling in the forest, Arya, who's still with Hot Pie and Gendry, comes across the Brotherhood without banners, who insist that they come with them, insisting that they'll give them a meal and then send them on their way. But Arya and the others don't trust them, but they force the issue and show that they have superior strength, so they go with them. Now, all Arya and her friends know about the Brotherhood without banners is that this is the group that the Tickler in the Mountain were looking for and why they tortured people for information. But as it turns out, the Brotherhood were originally a group of men sent from King's Landing by Ned Stark, who was the hand of the king at the time, with orders to kill Gregor Clegane the Mountain for crimes he committed in the Riverlands. However, later, King Robert died, Ned Stark was executed for treason, and war broke out in the Riverlands. So these men, who had orders from a now-dead man given in the name of a now-dead king, decided to continue their quest to stop the mountain, but are doing so in the name of the common folk of the Riverlands, many of whom have now joined their ranks, and as the common folks are the ones who are suffering from the war that they have nothing to do with. So they consider themselves not attached to either side, and thus consider both the Starks and the Lannisters as their enemies, as their main objective is to protect the people of the Riverlands. So the leader of this band is that Arya encounters is Thoros of Myr, a priest of R'hllor, the Lord of Light, who was known as a drunk in King's Landing. While they eat their meals, Thoros questions Arya and her friends about how they escaped Harrenhal. Funny, Arya doesn't mention Jaqen H'ghar and instead says that Gendry forged them weapons and they fought their way out. When Arya said that she could fight, they laugh at her, so she gets up and points a sword at Thoros, who easily knocks it away from her. So while they probably do underestimate Arya and it was kind of cruel of them to laugh at her, she still at this stage is mostly untrained and is absolutely no match for a skilled swordsman like Thoros of Myr. So this does begin to teach her humility. However, just when the Brotherhood are about to send Arya and her friends on their merry way, other members of the Brotherhood come in with a prisoner that they just captured, who turns out to be the Hound, Sandor Clegane. And of course, as soon as they unmask him, he instantly recognizes Arya, and unlike Littlefinger, he doesn't keep this information to himself and immediately tells Thoros. This, of course, changes everything, and Thoros no longer is going to let Arya go, and Arya accuses him of holding her prisoner, but he says that there's no chains on her, she's just not letting her go free for her own safety. A likely story that Arya doesn't entirely buy. But they set off to leave the inn at the Crossler Roads, but Hot Pie is to stay behind as payment to the innkeeper for all the free meals that the Brotherhood had received, because he's a good baker that they could use. But Hot Pie doesn't mind, because he really has no other place to be, and it's just as safe as any other, so Arya bids him farewell. Then she travels with the Brotherhood as they put a hood on her head so she can't see where they're going. And again, Thoros insists that it's for her own safety. However, they arrive at a cave where they meet the leader of the Brotherhood without banners, Beric Dondarrion, who appears to be another believer in the Lord of Light. They put Sandor Clegane on trial and accuse him of murder. He argues with them, saying that he's no more of a murderer than they are, and when they try to accuse him of slaughtering the Targaryen children when Tywin Lannister sacked King's Landing during Robert's Rebellion, Sandor argues that that was his brother, not him, and to lay your dead children on someone else's feet. So just when it looks like the Brotherhood have no concrete charge against him, Arya speaks up and accuses him of murdering Micah, the butcher's boy, whom of course Arya is still very angry about. The Hound tries to claim that he was just following Joffrey's orders, but that doesn't fly with the Brotherhood, who put him on trial for Micah's murder, but since they have no concrete evidence, they sentence him to a trial by combat, which Beric Dondarrion himself chooses to fight in. So there's a huge fight where Beric Dondarrion uses a flaming sword, which of course terrifies the Hound, as he's afraid of fire, but he holds his own in the fight and manages to kill Beric Dondarrion, and thus is proven innocent by the rules of trial by combat. Arya is enraged that he's going to get away with it, so she picks up a knife and tries to kill him herself, but the others hold her back, and when she yells that he should burn in hell, Beric Dondarrion comes back to life to say that one day he will, but not today. So Arya learns that Beric has come back to life, from the dead about 6 times now. And Gendry decides to stay on with the Brotherhood without banners in order to serve them. Arya isn't happy about this, and when Gendry says that the Brotherhood could be his family, she insists that she could be his family. But he responds by saying that she wouldn't be his family, she would be his lady. In other words, saying that he would just be another servant for a lord or lady, which he is sick of doing, and would rather join the Brotherhood, where they all appear to be more or less equals. Now, this is where a lot of people would ship Gendry and Arya and say that there's a romance brewing between them. I'm not sure I agree. I mean, I suppose there could be some romantic inklings, but I don't think that is the main basis for their relationship. It's more based on Arya trying to have a family after having hers ripped away from her. As she was forced to go on the run after seeing her father executed, where she lived her whole life with her family and was suddenly alone without them. So all the people she was traveling with, such as Euron and Jaqen, she tried to attach to them like family. But they mostly kept her at arm's length. But with Gendry and Hot Pie, they actually formed more of a sibling bond. And with Hot Pie now gone, Gendry is all she has left and doesn't want to lose him. So we see Arya training with the Brotherhood's archer on how to be a better archer. So again, we see her getting lessons from more experienced warriors. But these lessons don't last long, because in rides Melisandre, whom Arya seems suspicious of from the beginning. And it turns out that her suspicions are justified, as she's there to take Gendry with her. Beric and Thoros let her have him, claiming it's what their god wants, but when Arya sees Melisandre's men giving the Brotherhood gold, she knows what it's really about. They claim they need the gold to protect the people, but Arya insists that Gendry wants to be one of them and that they're betraying him. She also calls Melisandre a witch, saying that her intentions with him are not good, and it turns out Arya is correct, as Melisandre's true intention is to sacrifice Gendry in order to give Stannis more power. Arya tries to confront Melisandre, but in return, Melisandre just stares deep into her eyes and tells her that she can see a darkness within her, and in that darkness she sees many eyes of different colors, eyes that she'll shut forever. So basically, she can see that Arya is turning into a dark killer, and is kind of foretelling her future of being an assassin, but then she leaves with Gendry. However, this completely alienates Arya from the Brotherhood without banners, who she now hates and ignores. When Beric tries to assure her that giving Gendry to Melisandre is what their one true god wants, Arya said that he's not her god. When Beric asks who her god is, she simply says death. Now, this is a nice callback to both Syrio Forel and Jaqen H'ghar, as Syrio Forel taught her the saying, "What do we say to the god of death? Not today." And also Jaqen H'ghar, who talked about the deaths to offer up to the red god, which Arya took to mean the god of death. So they're taking her to River Run to ransom her up to her family, and she is just happy to get away from them and back to her family. However, when the Brotherhood without banners spot a Lannister party, they start going in the wrong direction in order to attack them, which Arya isn't at all happy about and calls them liars, so she takes the opportunity to run away from them. They chase after her, but before they can catch up to her, the Hound catches up to her first and takes her away. And thus we see Arya begin her relationship with her fourth mentor figure, the Hound, Sandor Clegane. Now, calling him her mentor is a bit precarious, and some might disagree with this, as Arya didn't have the same kind of relationship with him as she did with her previous mentors, whom she respected deeply and one could even say loved. Whereas with the Hound, there was always an underlying hatred there, and the relationship was a lot more adversarial. But beneath the surface, where she wants to hate him, she actually does grow to learn to love and respect him just as much as her other mentors, even when she won't admit this to herself. However, when they start their journey together, she still very much hates him and approaches him with a rock while he's sleeping with the intention of bashing his head in, but he wakes up and says that he'll give her the chance to kill him, but if she fails, he'll break both of her hands. So she gives up, realizing that she likely wouldn't be able to kill him, and as he rides with her, she's a bit confused because they appear to be going north instead of south, as she assumed that the Hound would be taking her back to Queen Cersei in King's Landing. But instead, he says that he's taking her to the twins. When she asks him why the twins, he explains that her brother and her mother are at the twins for a big wedding, as her uncle is marrying one of Walder Frey's daughters. So the Hound's intention is to give her back to her family and get a ransom, just like the Brotherhood intended to do, except the Hound knew where to go and wasn't wasting time doing it. While on their journey, they come across a pig farmer traveling with his goods. The Hound knocks him out and prepares to kill him, but Arya begs him not to. She taunts him by telling him that he thinks he's a big and tough killer, but she knew a killer who was much more deadly than he was and that could kill him easily without a second thought. Of course, she was referring to Jaqen H'ghar. But the Hound's only response was to point to the pig farmer and ask if he was this killer. When Arya shook her head no, he simply says, "Good," and then proceeds to want to try to kill this pig farmer, but Arya pushes him back again, insisting that he not kill him. So the Hound gives in, but tells her that she's got a kind heart and one day it's going to get her killed. But when the pig farmer starts to wake up, Arya herself knocks him out. So it's interesting that he calls Arya kind, as she has a lot of hate in her even at this stage. But Arya's hate and desires to kill is only directed at certain people who had wronged her. She doesn't wish to kill indiscriminately like the Hound does, which is a huge difference between them. So her journey with him will give her a different perspective on killing, for better or for worse. And when the Hound tries to justify his actions to her, she simply replies by saying that one day she's going to put a sword through his eye and out the back of his skull, and then she simply walks away. So the Hound approaches the twins with Arya, disguised as a pig farmer, using the cart he stole from the pig farmer that he knocked out. As sounds of music and merriment can be heard, it seems the wedding is in full swing, but the guards insist that the party's over, which is the Hound's first warning that something is wrong. But Arya takes the distraction as an opportunity to run away, to try to run to her family. But that's when things start going wrong. She sees her brother's direwolf, Grey Wind, in the kennel, but then a bunch of Frey soldiers come out and shoot and kill the direwolf. And all around them, the Freys begin slaughtering all of the Stark men. Arya still tries to make it inside to the castle to her brother and mother, but the Hound knocks her out, telling her that it's too late. And it turns out that he was right, as the Freys already started killing everyone at the wedding and will kill her mother and brother shortly thereafter, so had Arya tried to make it to them, she would have likely been killed as well. So the Hound saved her life here, and I think on some level she knows this even if she refuses to acknowledge it. However, Arya wakes up while the Hound is riding away with her while they're still in the camp surrounding the twins, where she can see all of the Stark soldiers being brutally murdered and the few remaining are being hunted down. But more than that, she sees a group of Frey men bring out the body of her dead brother Robb, whom they cut off his head and sewed his wolf's head onto the body, and they paraded around while chanting, "Here comes the king in the north." So Arya's life since leaving King's Landing has been hard, as it started with the traumatic experience of witnessing her father's execution and the slaughter of all of his men. But this experience, I think, is even more traumatizing. Perhaps the most traumatizing event she's ever experienced. Even though she was more close to her father than she was to her mother or her brother Robb, she had spent several years alone already at this stage, trying desperately to get back to her family, and just when it was finally about to happen, they were all killed right in front of her. As it seems, whenever she attempts to live a happy life with friends and family, they're either killed or taken away. And seeing hundreds of her family's men dying and burning while her brother's body was being paraded around was simply too much for her. And I do believe that a part of her died in this moment. That kind part that the Hound was just talking about. And her bloodlust gains a lot of steam in this point, as every time she tries to live a happy life, every time she chooses love, it seems the closest to her are simply killed. And that prospect of a good life is stripped away from her. So this, I also think, opens her up more to the Hound's point of view of how cruel and empty the world is. So when the Hound and Arya are gently riding away, they happen across a group of Frey men sitting by a campfire who are bragging, laughing, and cheering at having just killed all the Starks. In particular, they are mocking the death of her mother, and one soldier in particular brags that he was the one who sewed the wolf's head to Robb's body. This, of course, sets Arya off, as she suddenly jumps off of the horse and approaches the group of Frey soldiers claiming to be a poor girl asking for some food. When they tell her to fuck off, she says that she can pay for the food, and then shows him the coin that Jaqen H'ghar had given her and tells them that it's worth a lot. When he reaches for the coin, she accidentally drops it, and when he goes to pick up the coin, she stabs him in the throat with a knife, killing him. The other Frey men charge at her, but the Hound makes easy work of them, killing all of them. The Hound asks her where she got the knife from. She answers that she stole it from him. He seems angry, but what he says is, "Next time you do something like that, tell me first." So it's interesting that he's not angry at her for killing someone. He doesn't tell her that she shouldn't kill anyone. He's just angry because he was caught off guard, and that if they're going to kill people, he just wants to be prepared for it, which says a lot about the Hound's character. He then asks if that was the first man that she's killed, and she says yes, the first man. Now, as I already mentioned earlier, she did kill someone before this, but that was a boy, and that was more of an instinctual reaction, where here it was cold-blooded and calculated. And while at this stage she isn't a great warrior, she wouldn't have been able to take on all four men by herself. She did need the Hound's help. However, she was skilled enough to steal the Hound's dagger without him noticing. She was skilled enough to get close to her victim without him suspecting anything. She was skilled enough to drop the coin at the right time, and she didn't hesitate at all when it was time to stab his throat. So she does have some skill, but more than that, it shows how bloodthirsty she has become, particularly after experiencing that last traumatic event. She then picks up the coin and says the words that Jaqen H'ghar had taught her to say, Vala Morghulis. Now, I don't think she knows yet what these words mean, but I think she knows the general theme of death behind them. But more than that, it's expressing her desire to become that assassin that Jaqen offered to her to become. And at this stage, she probably is wishing that she would have gone with Jaqen instead of trying to reunite with her family, as whenever she chooses family, whenever she chooses love over hate, it ends badly for her. So I think at this stage she vows to always choose hate, to choose the path of revenge, the path of death, because of what she's seen so far. Only cold-blooded killers like the Hound, like the Lannisters, like the Freys survive. That men and the man like Jaqen H'ghar, whom she respects, only cold-blooded killers prosper, and so now she feels she needs to become that in order to survive, and more importantly, in order to get the revenge that she craves. So that brings us to the end of Season 3, so that is the end of Part 1 of my analysis of Arya Stark's character journey. I will return in about a week with Part 2 of my analysis of her journey, which I will cover the remaining of her character journey to the end of Season 7. And once that video is up, I'll put a link to that video in the description below. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. I know I haven't done many Game of Thrones videos in the past year, but I plan on doing a lot more in the coming months, so be sure to keep an eye out on my channel for that as well. I also do many other videos on other shows like Star Trek, The Expanse, Babylon 5, and more, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.